everyone, and welcome back to Sunday Reads with Renee. My name is Renee, and I wanted to take this time to thank everyone who's watched and subscribed to me so far. I really appreciate it. For this segment, I wanted to talk a little bit more about horror and thriller novels. And the reason for that is because around this time of year of October, I tend to read more horror novels than I usually do throughout the year because it's not really my genre or thing, but I feel it's fitting for the month of October because it is a little bit more of the spooky season. Halloween's coming up. As such, it feels quite fitting. Compared to thriller reads, I feel I can read them all year round because they do have those chills and mystery to it, and it feels like I get that little bit of a fear factor in place. Yeah, I wanted to examine this a little bit further, and I looked up what makes a horror story horror story. A horror story makes you feel fear and unease through elements like a scary atmosphere, a sense of vulnerable isolation, the unknown, and the threat of violence or the supernatural. And it goes into a little bit of these psychological elements, sensory techniques, themes, and tropes. So here you have fear, suspension tension, vulnerability and isolation, of course, atmosphere, pacing, the monster. You also have death and supernatural, darkness and violence, allegory, and commentary. And to me, this makes sense because if you look at the basic history of horror novels, you can see where they evolved, what they have in place. And you have the monster, you have the constant fear, you have people trying to get away from the monster and being in complete isolation, you have psychological terror. It fits a lot with the scare factor that you need to really make it a good horror novel. But what does a horror novel have to do that's different than a thriller? And this is what I found online. So, horror versus thriller is horror focuses on creating fear through scary, often supernatural elements, while thriller builds suspense and tension using psychological or realistic plots to keep the audience on the edge of their seats. And horror's primary goal is to scare, terrify, and create a sense of dread, while key elements include supernatural, paranormal, or monstrous elements with some graphic violence and gore, and focuses on horror itself would be the feeling it creates and the character's immediate reactions to it, whereas thriller builds suspense, tension, and excitement. Key elements are typically features realistic human-driven conflicts, mysteries, or conspiracies. Supernatural elements are rare, and the plot reveals the protagonist's journey to solve a problem or escape a dangerous situation. So this is just the basic information I found. Now, before I begin this video, I just want to let everybody know that I'm going to be using alternative words, so please be mindful of that. And I'll also be revealing plot details to some novels, so spoilers are ahead. Going back to that clip that I showed you earlier about horror versus thriller, it does make sense to me because the horror novels do have a lot of those key elements of the supernatural, paranormal, and monstrous that are fitting to a horror novel, what makes it very engaging and enticing to people that really love that genre. In my review of The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, we have the supernatural type and monstrous elements. The monster is the elk-head spirit, out for revenge, and is more ghost-like in creating fear and building that up to the novel's final conclusion. Other books such as Carrie by Stephen King, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and Dracula by Bram Stoker also offer those horror-like elements. Carrie, the title character, has supernatural powers, and when the bullying and harassment on her goes too far, she unleashes her revenge in a bloody finale. Frankenstein's monster in Frankenstein is a confused creation trying to do good and learn from humans only to become an outcast and on a pathway to revenge after mistreatment, while Dracula is very much the definition of a monster with no redeeming qualities and, and poses an actual threat to people. In terms of commentary, the novels I just mentioned can have more deeper meaning if you analyze them. At the same time, it does depend on your own interpretation. You have The Nature of Revenge, where Frankenstein's monster and Carrie feel rage and proceed with their revenge. However, this revenge becomes tragic as they end up becoming monsters as a result of how the world mistreats them. In Carrie's case, she is bullied and harassed even by her own mother, resulting in her rage becoming uncontrollable to unleash her powers, causing immense destruction. While Frankenstein's monster seeks mild revenge at first, but when Victor Frankenstein fails to create a female companion for the monster, it only gets worse from there. Both of them become monsters in their own right that only lead to tragedy. In my opinion, the only good Indians in Dracula are very different just by more deep analysis that I've gone into, just by looking at some things on the internet, as well as some research of links I'll leave in the description. The Elkhead spirit is seeking revenge against the four men who wronged her years before and shows no mercy. While it has the horror elements, there is a deeper meaning in Blackfeet culture, how they view the elk, spirits, and violence on women and the indigenous. Ending bittersweetly, in which revenge has taken place but does not change what happened. Dracula is a monster without remorse, but reflects the meanings of its time and place, such as race, anti Semitism, intimacy, religion, and treatment of women. And while there are a lot of analysis and interpretations on this, I view Dracula as different because it's only horror filled and meant to stoke fear, most likely reflecting societal fears and issues at the time. For myself, I do find Dracula to be a little bit more complicated because there's so much extensive research I wasn't able to really look into and analyze. Therefore, I'm going to leave those links in the description again and advise everybody to do their own research. So, while I do see these differences from a horror and a thriller novel, I do think you can find a lot of overlapping of horror elements that can be featured in these thrillers because there is that fear factor, the spookiness, and the scariness, and you can see a little bit of those themes embedded a tad bit. The Silence of the Lambs by Tom Harris has its monsters in Hannibal Lecter and Buffalo Bill. Both are serial K word who commit violent acts. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn features Amy Elliott Nunn, who makes plans for revenge in bloody, careful fashion, coming off as the monster, but in reality, so is her husband, Nick Dunn, to an extent. While I find these two books to have horror like elements, I can see why they are not viewed as such. There's plenty of fear, but on a more suspenseful and more often than not trying to solve a mystery. And though there are monsters in its actual people, not supernatural, paranormal figures, whom the whole world is going up against and can only be eliminated not by trial, but through other means. It's why I consider When No One Is Watching as more horror thriller than suspense mystery. There are the latter elements to it with strange disappearances that Sydney and Theo try to solve, but has horror elements because they are going up against a powerful group with elimination intentions, especially on the non white race. So, this is just my basic take on what I think about horror novels versus thriller novels. And for me, myself, I think both can be spooky and scary in their own ways. I think they have a lot to offer that we can enjoy and dissect as well. I feel it's a very good thing to mix both of those up, at least from my end, because again, when October comes around, I think of the spooky times with Halloween, and therefore I tend to gravitate more to the horror novels than I would normally throughout the year. So, this again is just my take, and I'd like to know what you think. Do you think there is a difference between a horror novel and a thriller? Do you feel they're the same or they overlap at times? Is there any particular books that you like? Do you think you can find a mixture of both, such as a horror thriller, even comedies as we see multiple times, like The X Factor? Again, this is my take, and I'd like to hear all your discussions in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the notification bell for more updates and videos in the future. I hope you've enjoyed this segment with me of Sunday Reads with Renee, and I'll be back again with another video. Please be sure to also look into the links in the description box for more information, and again, leave a comment. I'll be sure to see you next time. Bye.